Hey everyone, Tankenstein here. In this video, I'll be providing a full dev server overview of the Leviathans dev server, and we'll be showing you each of the new vehicles that will be coming in that major update. Bear in mind that there are going to be some vehicles left out of this because they are just simply not on the dev server. Gaijin does that with each and every dev server. They leave a few vehicles out so that they can be a surprise once the major update comes out. So again, you want to bear that in mind. Now, that being said, let's just kind of jump into it with the the RAH-66 Comanche. That's right, a vehicle so many people have been wanting for so long is finally here and will be somewhat stealth. They did mention that in the dev server live stream, so it will be kind of interesting. And this vehicle will be able to carry up to 14 Hellfires, which is absolutely phenomenal. And its XM301 cannon will be able to fire up to 1,500 rounds per minute, which is absolutely crazy because the standard AH-64D cannon, I think, is like 650 rounds per minute. So this will be able to fire substantially faster than even those could fire, and this will also be a very quick vehicle. It's just going to be an overall awesome vehicle, but unfortunately this is a premium and will be sitting more or less right where the AH-64A is. So we'll have to wait and see exactly how good this ends up being, but a lot of people are stoked to see it, and I know I am as well. Now that said, let's just kind of zoom on through here, go over to the Army for the US, and there will be several of these new packs, kind of like the Two Fronts pack given to Germany a few updates ago. They will be doing that for several nations here, and this one is the Hell on Wheels pack, in which you can get the Sherman M4A3 76mm, the Hellcat, and the Skink will be part of this gigantic pack, a 3-vehicle pack. Of course, you have 2 different vehicles, and then your SPAA. That seems to be the route that they're going. You have 2 vehicles plus an SPAA for a semi-well-rounded lineup, and will be inhabiting Tier 3, Rank 3, which is pretty cool in my opinion. Otherwise, there's not all too much going on for the US. As I've said many times in the past, once you get into like having all these nations here, the amount given to any one nation in any given update will probably be less than it was once we only had like 5 nations in game. But one vehicle that we are getting, and actually this is a totally new type of vehicle, we are getting basically SPAA crews, if that makes any sense. It's kind of difficult to say exactly what it is, but basically there will now be a function coming to War Thunder in which SPAA will have basically 3 different vehicles, or up to 3 different vehicles that are all player controlled, in which you could inhabit like the, as you can see here, the command vehicle, if you will, or like the radar vehicle, and then you'll also have 2 separate launcher vehicles, or rather up to 2 separate launcher vehicles. So this will be very interesting. And this one will have access to the AIM-120C5 and AIM-9X, but as you can see, there are no stats on this, so we don't even know how good these are going to be, but very, very interesting indeed. As you can see, I mean, the model itself is just barely even done, but very cool in my opinion. Now, otherwise, when it comes to aircraft, unfortunately, there is not really anything to show here for them. But one huge thing, and this is going to be the update for basically ships and SPAA, the biggest thing is just, it literally are going to be the ships. And we are getting the USS Iowa, which I am so freaking happy that we are getting. I'm going to be playing the hell out of Naval. Like, I really actually do enjoy playing Naval, but now that we have these crown ships to play, and there are going to be several more, it is just beyond awesome. And if you guys want, I will do like a video, or several videos rather, so I'll be showing off the F2, which by the way, Japan is getting the F2, 2 different variants of it, which I will show in a few moments, but I will also show off, probably in like 1 or 2 videos, naval vehicles as well, because they are just such a huge part of this update. In fact, actually, this is probably like the first naval-centric update in a very, very long time. And they are also, of course, getting the Huckins PT-95, which I'm sure more people are excited about compared to the Iowa. Now, moving on here, we have the German Army. And as I said before, they are getting pretty much every nation, or at least a lot of nations, are going to be getting these new sort of weapons, these new SPAA. Germany is no different. They get a gigantic one, but even this is not going to be the biggest one being added to game, and it is going to have some really gnarly SPAA missiles in the Iris-T, which will be extremely powerful. And again, this will make use of the new SPAA system that top tier can expect to be able to use. Now, they do not have any helicopters helicopters, unfortunately, but they do have a kind of subtectory, if you will, for the Swiss. So it is being added here. It's not like a complete subtectory, but they are getting things like the FA-18C Late, the FA-18C Hornet, which this will more or less be equivalent to the American FA-18C. You will also be getting, again, this will be more or less equivalent to the FA-18C Late. For the Americans, the F-5E, which is very interesting. You will also be getting the Mirage 3S and the Hunter F-58 1971. So you're going to be getting a lot of very interesting vehicles, at least in my opinion, coming in this major update. And there is apparently a low-tier vehicle, they did mention this, that will be coming, but they declined to say exactly what it will be, but it should be around, I think they said 2.0 BR, which is kind of interesting. Now, Germany is going to be getting two major additions here in the Blue Water Fleet, the Gneisenau, and of course, the Bismarck. That's right, this is something so many people have been wanting. I feel like Gaijin, for this update, they just said, let's give everybody the big ships that they've always been wanting, and see if Naval finally comes alive, and I hope it does. Also, if you guys didn't notice, there is going to be a huge expansion in BRs, which is just very interesting. So they are going up to, I believe, 8.7. Of course, the Bismarck is 8.3. I think, what was it? The Iowa is 8.7, which makes sense. The Iowa is a bit, I don't know if you want to call it better than the Bismarck, but realistically speaking, it kind of is. And then, of course, we also have the Gneisenau, which is basically, this is an interesting one, because this is a Scharnhorst-class vehicle, but it has the 38-centimeter cannons that the Bismarck has, whereas the Scharnhorst never got those. So the Gneisenau never got those as well. They were planned for the Scharnhorst and Gneisenau, but just never added. So this is kind of a special take on the Gneisenau. As you can see in the title, it says Project, which makes sense. Very, very interesting, and I'm actually really stoked to be seeing this coming to game, because it will just be absolutely gnarly. And apparently, these 38-centimeter cannons will have a very high rate of fire, up to 2.6 rounds per minute, which for that size of cannon is wunderbar. Now, otherwise, they don't really have all too much going on for naval, or coastal, rather, which is kind of expected. But we have a big addition, a few big additions here for the Russians. Of course, they are getting their 1945, their May 1945 pack, which will have an IS-1. And bear in mind, these are pretty much all cosmetic changes. You have the T-34-85, which will be 1980 or 45, and the Hanomag. Now, this will have 20mm cannons rather than the 15s on a similar vehicle that you have in the German tech tree, which will be interesting, but I don't really know if that'll be all too important. Now, interestingly, this does have some structural steel additions, as well as it looks like some slat armor here on the side, or some cage armor, which will be actually kind of interesting. This might be able to have some effect insofar as adding increased protection, especially versus heat shells. So we'll have to wait and see once this model is complete, because as you guys know, dev server, so many things can change. I mean, the type of steel, like being that this is structural steel, that means that it's pretty much the weakest steel that you can get in game. But if this ends up being like homogeneous steel or something like that, that could end up being a whole lot of additional armor, being that it is spaced and somewhat angled as well. So we'll have to see exactly what comes from that, but it could be actually the best T-34-85 in game once it comes out, even if just slightly. Then of course we have the T-72B3M, which will have the Arena APDS, as you might be able to see here. Yep, as you can see here, it says APS Arena M, so it will be able to stop threats up to 1,000 meters per second, at least in theory. And then of course we have aviation. There's nothing for helicopters, unfortunately, but we do have a brand new vehicle, the L-39ZA Albatross, which will be 6.7 BR, believe it or not, which is kind of interesting. A lot of people are going to be upset about this being 6.7 BR, but there are some jets, give or take, around this BR. If its rate of climb is what it is, and its max speed is what it says it'll be, I really don't know how effective this thing is going to be. It's just not all that amazing of a vehicle. Just because it's a jet doesn't mean that it's amazing, but it does, of course, have access to a pretty decent amount of under, I guess you could say, like underbody ordnance, if you will, but nothing all too amazing. I mean, it's just going to be able to get in, get out kind of quickly, not even all that quickly, and still be pretty effective. But insofar as Russian air is concerned, unfortunately, that's all we've got. Then, of course, we have Russian blue water, and we have the Sevastopol, which will have the same cannons as the Gneisenau, which is just absolutely crazy, but it will have pretty middling armor as far as I've been made aware, and this will be a premium. And then you have the Sovietsky Soyuz, which will have huge cannons, 406 millimeters. This thing will just be a huge vehicle and will be extremely powerful at this BR. So we'll have to see exactly how this thing performs. But like most Soviet vehicles, like most Soviet Blue Water Fleet vehicles, these are just paper vehicles. They never existed in real life. They were just drawn up. You know, as you can see, it says project. Oh, this doesn't say project, but this was also a UK vehicle, if I'm not mistaken. This was what? Conti di Cavour, if I'm not mistaken, Italian? And then, of course, project. I mean, so many project vehicles for the Russians, but it is what it is. Without project vehicles, they would have no substantial capability in the Blue Water Tech tree, unfortunately. Now, of course, you also have another 3-pack with the UK. You have the Firefly, the VC Firefly for the Overlord pack, the Avenger for the Overlord pack, and the Crusader AA for the Overlord pack. So pretty capable. And again, these have mostly cosmetic changes on them. I mean, in theory, some of them might have some structural steel here and there, or maybe like track armor, which could, in theory, help some people in some instances, but it's not really going to be able to do all too much. Now, of course, you also have the Badger, as you can see here, 9.0 BR ICV with a 30mm autocannon. Pretty standard stuff. You know, I mean, you see a lot of these types of vehicles at and around this BR, so nothing all too unusual. Then, of course, they unfortunately have nothing for helicopters. And if I'm not mistaken, and again, if I forget or miss any one vehicle in this, let me know in the comments below, but they also have nothing for aviation. Now, when it comes to the Blue Water, they have the HMS Vanguard, the last battleship ever built, and it looks a little bit funky, like, you have this huge ship, and then you have like these relatively small turrets. Like, these are very compact turrets, relatively speaking, but they're actually not bad size. They're 15-inch cannons inside these turrets. So it's, you know, it is what it is, but they only have up to 2 rounds per minute. Whereas again, those 38 centimeters by the Bismarck and also the Gneisenau and the, if I'm not mistaken, the Sevastopol, those all have faster reloads than this. So it'll be kind of interesting, like substantially faster reloads. But very cool piece of history here. The last battleship ever completed, which is, in my opinion, a very, very cool thing to have in War Thunder. That's one of the best parts about War Thunder, in my opinion, is just going to be the historical aspect. Then, of course, you also have the new tandem, or whatever you will, sort of SPAA that will be available for the Japanese top tier, very similar to the other types of SPAA that have numerous vehicles that will be added to this updated, to this major update. They have nothing coming for helicopters, but of course they do have something coming for aviation. 2 things, actually. And we have the F2A, which is going to be amazing. We'll be able to carry the AAM-3 and the AAM-4, up to 8 missiles. And you also have anti-shipping missiles. That's right, the ASM-1 and 2, as well as some other really good things. And you also have the F2A ADTW. This will be a premium, and we'll be able to carry the AAM-3s, which are going to be fantastic, and also AIM-7Ms, which, not going to be amazing, but you know what? Those AAM-3s are going to be very, very nice. And then, of course, you also have the same ASM-1 and 2, and it looks like largely similar anti-ground loadout, though I'm not entirely sure. It doesn't look like it's exactly the same, nor as good, but it'll be largely similarly functional. And of course, you might be wondering, oh, this is just a Japanese F-16. It's actually a very different vehicle. It shares a very similar design, obviously, like very, I think, almost identical, but it is I think, a much larger vehicle. It's just a very different vehicle overall. Then, of course, we have the big boy, the vehicle so many people have been wanting for so long, the Yamato. That's right, the largest cannons ever put on a on a warship right here. 18-inch cannons. I think there were like 18.1-inch cannons on like some really small British ships during World War II, but those were, I don't know if those really count in this way. So far as battleships are concerned, the largest, 460 millimeters, and they don't really have all that much TNT equivalent in them, but when you're looking at armor pen for the APCBCs, you're looking at over 870 at very max armor pen, and still a decent amount of armor, or a TNT equivalent with about 25. So this thing is going to be just so much fun, and it will be able to fire up to 1.9 rounds per minute, which isn't absolutely terrible, but that is the aced crew time. So we'll have to see exactly how that performs. Otherwise, they have nothing coming for the coastal fleet. Now, moving on to Chinese ground, they will be having the CSSA-5, which will basically be, it's not going to be like one of the new SPAA where it's a multi-vehicle sort of thing, if I'm not mistaken. This is all self-contained, but it will be still very, very effective. Then, of course, they have nothing coming for helicopters, unfortunately. Well, I don't really know if you want to call that unfortunately, and I believe nothing for air. Again, if I miss anything, just let me know in the comments below. Call me a big dumb stinky poo-poo head, and I will get the point. Next up, they are going for Italy, and they will be getting the Leopard 1A2, which is kind of interesting. Now, if I'm not mistaken, this is supposed to have night vision. I forget the exact differences between this and the standard Leopard 1 or the 1A1, but it will be a, in my opinion, a pretty welcome thing, especially as it's an optional vehicle sitting in the same portion of the tech tree, or in the same folder rather, as the OF-40. No helicopters, unfortunately, for Italy, and if I'm not mistaken, we are getting no aircraft, but they are getting the RN Roma, which will be very interesting. This is an extremely famous vessel, if not for why it was destroyed or how it was destroyed, but also, this was the flagship of the Italian fleet that was brought down by a Fritz X bomb on its way to being surrendered to the, if I'm not mistaken, the Americans. So, very, very unfortunate, of course, how it was, but a very interesting vehicle, nonetheless, and extremely powerful, and it's 1 millimeter larger cannons than what we see on the Bismarck. Then, of course, you have the French. They are getting the MSC, which is basically like a Leclerc, except with no armor, and they've said this in the dev stream. What you see here is pretty much going to be what actually comes into the game. So this is going to have minimal armor, but still have an incredibly powerful cannon with, 120 millimeters. Of course, you don't really see exactly what sort of ammo is here because this is the dev server. Everything can change, and a lot of these models are unfortunately incomplete. Of course, you will also have the Leopard 2A4NL and LES, which will basically be just a standard Leopard 2A4, but with a camo net, which we've also already seen in game before. Now, they are also getting the Fokker DXXI, or D21 if I'm not mistaken, which is kind of cool, but doesn't really matter all too much. And we will be getting the NF5A, which is kind of cool. This is a Netherlands version of the F5A, and it will be able to carry AIM-9Ms, or Ns rather. If I'm not mistaken, these are equivalent to AIM-9Ps, so it's not going to be like amazing or anything like that, but still pretty cool in my opinion. And if you want, you can get the AIM-9Js, which those are probably equivalent to AIM-9Es? Probably, I'm just assuming here, but I may be wrong. But this will be a pretty standard F5, because those are extremely versatile vehicles overall, but not too much for the French air tech tree, but they will be getting something. Then, of course, as I said before, very large battleship heavy sort of update, and we are getting the Richelieu, or Richelieu. I really wish I understood more French, but this will be a very, very good vehicle. 8.3 VR. It's got its quad turrets, and it's just so symmetrical. Beautiful ship, in my opinion. This is a vehicle that I feel like a lot of people are going to enjoy. Then, of course, going to Sweden, they will be getting, of course, like so many other nations, a new top-tier SPAA, which is kind of cool. I think this is a self-contained unit, but it is kind of like two vehicles at the same time, but you don't have to set up numerous vehicles. Correct me if I'm wrong in the comments below, but this is going to be a very, very powerful vehicle using the Iris-T sort of SPAA missiles, if you will, or SAMs, rather. And then, of course, the Swedish air tech tree will be getting the FA-18C MLU-2, which will basically be about the same as the F-18C, except except this will have access to anti-ground weapons, which is, in my opinion, really cool, long overdue. This should have been what came into the regular tech tree in the first place. These should be folded vehicles, in my opinion. I mean, this is just kind of silly. It's the same vehicle, except one has anti-ground, whereas the other one doesn't. Otherwise, they're pretty much the same vehicle. So it's just a bit silly, in my opinion, that they are not currently folded together, which they should be. And then, of course, we have Israel here to kind of round this off. They have the largest of the vehicles, which is just, look at this. Look at this. It is just an absolutely monstrous vehicle, and it's just going to be completely insane once this comes to War Thunder. And I think that this is one of the multi-vehicle SPAA setups that will be coming in the newest update. Correct me if I'm wrong, but that will be their new top tier, again, SPAA. Otherwise, they're not getting anything for helicopters, or, if I'm not mistaken, for aviation as well. So that being said, that is the dev server as it stands for the next major update. Again, new vehicles can and will be added probably throughout the next few days to this dev server, so if there's anything interesting, I'll try to report on that. I'll try to do some gameplay for some of the vehicles, including the F2, which I'm really, really excited to play, and of course also some of the battleships, because this is going to be the battleship and SPAA update, which a lot of people are stoked for. I hope this brings a lot of people to Naval, because Naval has been needing it. I love playing top tier Germany Naval. Like, I've got the Scharnhorst, I love it, and now that we've got something after the Scharnhorst with the Bismarck, and we also have the Gneisenau, if that's what you're kind of into, I'm just so happy that this is finally here. And of course the Yamato, which I'm going to be working for. I don't know if I'm all that far from Yamato. Oh yes I am, but I'm not as far as most people, so that's at least a plus. But either way, thanks so much. Oh, and also I completely forgot, I don't know how the hell I missed this, but the French are also going to be getting the M24DK. I don't know if it's here, but they should be getting the M24DK, or maybe it's the Swedish oh, here it is. Yes, the M24DK, my apologies, I didn't want to miss this. It will be a brand new, well, not a brand new, it's just basically an M24 for Denmark. That's pretty much it. Otherwise there's not really all too much being added to this insofar as most aircraft and most tanks are concerned. It's just a very battleship SPAA heavy sort of thing, and I'm wondering how battleships are going to function versus jets. But that being said, thanks for watching. I'll see you all on the other side. Take care, everyone.